All right, today we're digging into something huge that's happening all over the world. There's this growing backlash against immigration, and we're going to look at what it really means for one of the biggest and, frankly, most successful groups of people living abroad, the Indian diaspora. Send them home. Yeah, just three simple words. But this is a phrase that used to be kind of hidden away on the political fringes. Not anymore. Now it's becoming a rallying cry, and you're hearing it in cities all across the globe.
So you gotta ask, what's behind all this? What's fueling this fire? Well, that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna break down where this is happening, why it's happening, and look at the real human consequences for millions of people who are caught right in the middle of it.
Okay, first things first, let's get a real sense of just how big this whole thing is. I mean, this is a truly global phenomenon, probably way more widespread than you might even realize.
It's easy to think this is just a Western thing, right? But it's not. We're seeing these movements gaining some serious steam everywhere from the US and Australia to, and this might surprise you, places like Japan and South Korea. And of course, you've got social media acting like a giant megaphone, just blasting these ideas from the edges right into the heart of mainstream politics. But that leads to the big question. Why? Why now? And why is it happening pretty much everywhere at once? Well, as we're about to see, there's no single easy answer. It's actually a really complex mix of different fears and frustrations all bubbling up to the surface. So when you break it all down, experts point to these four main things. First, you've got economic anxiety, the classic fear about jobs and putting too much strain on public services. Then there are cultural clashes, this feeling that a country's identity is changing too fast, maybe being diluted. Third, there are security fears, where people start linking immigration to crime or instability. And finally, and this is a big one, you have politicians who figure out how to tap into that anger to get votes. And the thing is, these four things, they all blend together and make each other worse. Okay, so we've talked about the big picture, but what does this actually look like on the ground? How does it affect real people? To get a better handle on that, we're going to zoom in on the Indian diaspora, one of the largest and most visible communities of immigrants in the world. And for them, the pressure is coming from a few different directions. First, and this is really concerning, there's a clear rise in hostility and even hate crimes being reported. Second, governments are really tightening the screws on things like visas, which makes life super uncertain for so many. And then there's this weird, ironic twist, a model minority backlash. I mean, the incredible success of the Indian community in areas like tech and medicine is actually starting to cause resentment. It's fueling this idea that they're creating unfair competition for the best jobs or spots in universities, which really makes you think, right? What about all the people who are here legally, who are highly skilled? We're talking doctors, engineers, scientists, folks who are doing everything by the book. What happens to them when they get caught in the middle of this political crossfire? Well, let's take a look at the reality for a tech worker in the US on an H-1B visa. The second they lose their job, a countdown clock starts. A really brutal 60-day clock. They have just 2 months to find a whole new company that's willing to sponsor their visa. And if they can't, they have to pack up their entire life, their home, their friends, everything, and leave the country. It's an absolutely insane race against time. But this isn't just about the human cost, as huge as that is. There's also a big economic chain reaction happening. And for the countries putting these policies in place, well, it's often a story full of unintended consequences. So, on the one hand, the idea is pretty simple. Let's protect jobs for our own citizens. That's the intended goal. But the unintended result, the flip side of that coin, can be a whole lot bigger. We're talking about a massive loss of what's called human capital. I mean, when you start pushing out brilliant scientists and engineers, you're taking a huge gamble with the very innovation that your economy depends on. And listen, these economic shockwaves, they travel in both directions. Just look at this number, $125 billion. That is how much money the Indian diaspora sent back home in a single year. To put that in perspective, that's more than 3% of India's entire GDP. It's a massive critical lifeline for their economy. So all of this leads us to the last piece of the puzzle. With so many of its best and brightest facing this kind of pressure abroad, what's India's plan? Is there a way to turn this age-old brain drain into a brain gain? To really get why this is such a challenge, you have to look at this one number first, 0.65%. That's the tiny fraction of its GDP that India currently spends on R&D, research and development. And honestly, that's a big part of why so much top talent decides to leave in the first place. There just aren't enough world-class opportunities at home. And this chart right here, wow, it really shows you the gap. You can see India's spending way down here. Then there's the recommended target for a country its size. And then way up here is the average for other major economies. The takeaway is pretty clear. If you want to keep your top talent, you have to be able to compete for it on the world stage. So, what's the game plan? Well, experts are floating this four-part strategy. First, completely revamp the R&D scene. More money, less red tape, to create great jobs right there in India. Second, you gotta fix talent retention. That means offering competitive salaries and improving universities so people want to stay. Third, step up and provide real legal and diplomatic support for citizens living abroad to help protect them. And finally, and this is a cool idea, encourage brain circulation. Make it super easy for knowledge and money to flow back and forth so it's not a one-way drain anymore, but a two-way street. And that leaves us with the big question. And it's not just for India, it's for everyone. As the world gets more nationalistic, what's the future of global talent going to look like? Is it going to be a one-way brain drain? Or can we figure out a way to create a more dynamic back-and-forth brain circulation? You know, the answer to that question is going to define our economies for a long, long time.